And there we go. So if you guys see me do this, it's because my audience is over here. Um, but welcome, another Hot Topic Tuesday. It is now, guys, we are into August, Tuesday, August 4th. And, interesting subject matter today. And I can kind of tell by the numbers that we've got, along with the offices who've logged in. So we should have a pretty fair amount of you today. So thank you for your interest. And as you guys do this, as you're out there doing your business, let me know what you're running into, because it was my experience this past week that created this hot topic. And I can tell by the numbers that this is one that you guys have an interest in. So just, keep that out there and send things my way so that we can have topics of interest to you. So here's what brought this one up. And I'll remind you again, just for those who might not have got my email invitation for yesterday, but I ran into one where there was a gal that was surprised that I was willing to not take less on my compensation as part of negotiations for a purchase agreement. Who's had that before, just out of curiosity's sake, where a listing agent was asking you to take less? Okay, there's a few of us that have had it. Fantastic. Great. Yes. All right. So I figured I couldn't be alone, and literally a very, very good long-term agent actually stated to me that she was shocked to hear what she heard from me. And as she put it, it was, well, I'm shocked to hear that somebody with your experience in production would say that. I've never heard it before. And my simple response was, well, then you've not worked with somebody like me. So I had a contract with my buyer that was 3%. She said, well, my seller's good to go on everything, but the only thing you and I need to do is to take 2.25%. Did anybody do the math on that? How much was she asking me to give up? What percentage of my commission? Anybody calculate it out? It was actually 0.75%, 0.75%, but that's not much, but it was 25% of what I was supposed to be if my math worked out when I calculated it. A quarter of what I was supposed to receive is what she was actually asking me to take less. So I gave her a simple no, I can't do that. We're going to talk about why and how, and of course the end result was I got my full compensation. I didn't give anything up. We got the deal put together, and in the bottom line, I've got a very excited couple who's buying their new home. Okay. So let's explain this. Or first this, I'm going to throw out some questions, and I got my notes written down here. Here's the first one. Can you explain what the DOJ has done to the consumer? Do you know what I mean by that? Do you guys know what I mean by the DOJ, what the DOJ did to the consumer? Part of what I'm going to do is to work on mindset. How many of you think that the DOJ did it to us? Or we'll call it the greedy attorneys too. What I'm talking about, guys, is a settlement. In this settlement, what did they think they were doing to us? What has to happen? By the way, this is group participation time.
So in my mind, I think they did a
conversation. There's got to be a conversation. Keep going, Lydia.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay. So in my mind, they did us a favor because many times we walked around with buyers without a contract. So now I tell them, I can't show you the house. We have to sign a contract. So I think they did us a favor.
Lydia, I like your mindset. They actually did us a favor, because now we're forced to have a buyer sign an agreement before we show them a home. I like that mindset. What did that do to the consumer? It forced the consumer to have to sign an agreement before they can see homes. I would rather blame it on that the DOJ, it isn't what they did to us, but Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is what they've done for you. Or depending upon your relationship, you might even say it's what they did to you. More often than not, with the people I work with, I can say, are you familiar with the settlement that realtors had with the DOJ and a bunch of money-hungry attorneys? That's my verbiage with them. But typically I'm working with people I know. They say, no, what do you mean? Well, I said, they've now forced you to have to sign an agreement with me before I can show you homes. Is that not true? Everybody give me a head nod. Now, again, if you're busy trying to write down any of the verbiage that we're going to discuss today, remember that this will be in the HRC Agent Development channel on YouTube, and that's all you've got to do if you haven't ever been there before. HRC Agent Development channel. Livonia, thank you for participating. I like to see the thumbs up. Okay, so knowing that that's a circumstance, I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer this. But with the buyers, because we're talking about negotiating, not with the buyer at this time where we're getting a contract signed or an agreement signed. We're talking about, did I get that agreement signed before I showed homes? Now, here's what we're all going to do. We're all going to nod our heads and we're going to do this. Yes, I am, right? Before I ever go out and show them any homes, I'm going, yes, I've got a contract signed with them. So if you got that contract signed, what else should accompany that immediately? You might even actually get that signed beforehand. Form K, agency disclosure. If you have one, you got to have the other. And when I say if you have one, if you have disclosed it, I'm representing you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. I must have an agency contract. I've got to have the buyer representation agreement. If I signed a buyer representation agreement, I've got to have the Form K agency disclosure. Those two go hand in hand. We should almost just put them together. When you open up one, you get the other. Okay? That might even be a thought that's a package that we put together. Emily, I see you there. Maybe that's just a package. And Amanda, if you're on, maybe that's a thought. It's just because we should be sitting down with a buyer, asking them to sign a contract and doing the agency disclosure. Okay? So those are the first two documents that we should have. Now, did you get your agreement signed at your 3%? And there everybody says, yes, I am. Great. Okay. Now, here's the next question. You have an agreement, you have a disclosure. The agreement says I get paid 3%. Who pays me that?
The buyer, the client.
Okay, okay. So, and you guys see it coming through. See them all down on the bottom there, guys. You guys are too far ahead. Who is responsible? And by the way, this is good verbal judo. Write this down or watch this again. Who's responsible to see that you get paid?
The client, the buyer.
The buyer.
Broker.
That's what we all need. And some of you are saying yes, but who is responsible for the payment?
Broker.
Who's really paying you?
Oh.
It's the buyer. It's a very integral part of understanding how to negotiate your compensation as part of the purchase agreement, but not negotiating with a seller. Your buyer's paying you. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody that doesn't see that? I think it's really important. That's a very important part for you to catch. The buyer is who's paying you. read the contract. Now, our contract then says, hey, realtor, we want you to do what? Build it in as part of our purchase agreement. Make that compensation part of the purchase agreement. It also says, nope, we'll pay you. Doesn't it? I'm telling you, when we put this together, I made sure that was in there, and it came out very specifically because now we have it in writing. We went beyond just sales technique. We went into putting it in writing so that you get to discuss it at the time of the signing of the agreement. So Mr. and Mrs. Way, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, there's a couple of ways that you can see that I received my compensation. We can kind of go with the way that things have always run, and that is we just build it into the transaction and you ask the seller to pay for it through the purchase agreement. You're paying cash. Would you like to just pay the compensation directly and we can reduce the price? You see? Otherwise, we gave money to the seller for the seller to turn around and give it to us when we as the buyer could have just paid the realtor, you, directly. In the end, that might actually and will save both the seller and the buyer money. Okay? Everybody see the concept with that? So who pays me? It's the buyer. I must understand it is the buyer. In most cases, the buyer is directing us to assist them in putting together their purchase agreement and ask us to negotiate our compensation through the purchase agreement. And if we got that, that's a huge part. If we miss that, it's going to be more difficult because you're going to want to try to negotiate compensation. So, are you all charging everybody the same amount? Okay, I see. Dawn, thank you. I love a head nod that I can see. We should all be charging everybody the same amount because one of the answers I'm going to give you is going to deal with you charging everyone the same amount. Now, I'm not going to say there's not special circumstances. There are special circumstances. I think there are two issues. Times when it's the right thing to do to give up a portion of our compensation, when it's the right thing, and when it's a good business decision, but not as part of the negotiation of a purchase agreement, because I already have a contract, my buyer's going to pay me, and this is the way they want or need to do it. So if I can get a little emotional, don't screw with my compensation. It's not up for negotiation. Everybody reading my face really well? I hope so. Okay. Now, next thing I wrote down. Oh, yeah. Because this is where that goes. What's your integrity worth? How could you charge somebody 3% and then take 2.25% for somebody else? How do you do that? Or I've been taking 3 and I do 2.25% for this one, and then the next person I'm going to sign up for 3% again. How do you charge somebody 3% and somebody else 2.25% when everything's the same? Well, I didn't want to lose the deal. Well, if you were going to take 2.25%, shouldn't you have just signed a contract, said you'd take 2.25%? My integrity is worth an awful lot. And I think, Jack, you put it in there that it's everything. Here's another rhetorical question. Does it really matter what the seller's offering as compensation? Does it matter? Jack, thank you. I can see Jack shaking his head and reading his lips. No, it doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Got to make sure. I'm got a contract with the buyer pays me. You got it, guys. It's our contract. All right. Another key thing that we just got to remember. So it doesn't matter. Matter of fact, let's do a quick little poll. Everybody type in yes, so yes or no. Yes, I contact the listing agent to find out what the seller's offering, or no. Seen a yes yet? I didn't see a yes. Okay. And I'm guessing that most of us are just going, we realize it doesn't matter. So what? They're offering zero. Am I still going to get paid? Might it change the way I negotiate if I did know that? Yes. Now, and I'm going to throw this out. Nothing's changed. If we really consider the code of ethics, wouldn't it be potentially what, matter of fact, not even code of ethics. This might just be licensing law. Might it be part of due diligence to know? I would tell you, if you're in a competing situation, I believe you should call. That'll tell you kind of the mindset of a owner. You may want to know in a case of multiple offers. It may just be out of licensing law and our fiduciary duties that we actually owe that to the buyer whom we represent anyway. But here's the bottom line. As far as compensation, we get what the buyer signed for. All right, everybody good there? What's my next note? I wrote this down. If a seller is unwilling to pay the buyer broker compensation as part of the purchase agreement and offers to pay less than the buyer has asked, is that not a rejection of the offer? Yeah, can you repeat that? Yes. So my buyer has presented an offer that said, I need you, seller, to pay my buyer broker's fee of 3%. And the buyer, the listing, the seller, see, you did hear it right. The seller says, well, no, but I'd pay 2% for you. Is that a rejection? You're saying, it's kind of, yeah. A lot of you, there's Jack's going, yes. I saw John said yes. I saw Holly with a yes. It popped up real quick. I don't really see it, but the answer is yes, that's a rejection. A counter offer, guys, we have to know it's a rejection. They rejected the offer as it's written. If they make any change of all, that's a rejection. Now, there's a reason I'm giving you this question. I want you to think about it because I'm going to use some psychology on you as a listing agent and your seller. I do this with my seller. If you feel that you have to reject the offer, I understand. Pause. If you feel that you must reject the offer, I understand. Now, what are they actually going to say after that? Couldn't I make a counter offer? Well, yeah. I'd ask you to do that, please. But don't negotiate my compensation. How often does a buyer have extra money where they can pay us out of pocket? Many could. I think, at least who I work with, most of them, they're using pretty much everything that they got available. And then anything else that they got left over is so that they can take care of the house and make it theirs. So don't negotiate that. Don't negotiate that. I would just tell them, So look, I understand if you feel you have to reject it, but don't mess with my compensation. My buyer needs that. Now, I'm going to leave you hanging with that because I think you'll get it with this. Concessions. And this again is just working on a mindset and an understanding. If a buyer needs them, what is the seller to do? If a buyer's asking for 3% in concessions plus 3% for your buyer broker fee, and they need both, what do? What are their options? There's only two options. Seller either accepts it or the seller rejects it. Holly, you're close, but Holly, I always appreciate you because you're so wonderful in participating. And it helps me land a point. They have to reject it to make a counteroffer. Use it. Guys, we're in sales. You have rejected the offer or you accept the offer. If you reject, what's your option? Now it would be to counteroffer. Okay? But we've got to understand, and you use this with your sellers. A counteroffer isn't going to make it happen. When you counter, the buyers have the option to walk. If you reject, they walk. Yeah, but what if I counteroffer? They have the option of walking. So you have yes or no. Give them simple understanding and choices. So now they say, nope, can't do it. I'm going to counteroffer. So you're asking for your brokerage fee. Let me rephrase that. The buyer's asking for the brokerage fee to be paid by the seller. They're also asking for another 3%. They need both. Either you're the listing agent or you're talking with a listing agent. What would you encourage to do once you know they have to reject the offer? What would you guide the listing agent to do? Just leave it rejected and call it a day? Would you tell them, well, reduce the concessions, or would you say, well, let's reduce my commission, my compensation? So we're going to counter offer. And what are we going to counter? I'm getting some feedback here. I see concession. I should have set up my other computer so I could see the chat more. This is where we're seeming a little bit lost. There's now this, oh, Marjorie, you nailed it. And this is the part, look how long it took to come up with that one choice. This is the interesting part. Don't negotiate compensation. I've told you that the buyer needs all the money. Guys, if they need that, they need the compensation paid. So how can you do it and still give them concessions and still get compensation paid? Who put it up there? Adjust the price. It seems so simple. But I remember when we first had to start talking about this and everybody was, oh, no, what's changed? Nothing. Look at the closing statement. It still shows the seller's paying the whole thing. And by the way, our purchase agreement is written in such a way that it says the seller is to contribute 3% to be applied toward the buyer's broker's fee. And it's done that way for a very simple reason. Oh, Peg, thank you. I didn't write this into my notes. Peg says, well, yeah, but the house still has to appraise. Yeah. In the past, when you asked for concessions, the seller wasn't advertising that they were going to give concessions. Did you ask for them anyway? Yes. Did the house still have to appraise? Yes. So if you're going to write an offer, make sure it's an offer that is acceptable to everyone and it will appraise. Ah, Danette, you nailed it. At that point, they would have to go back to the market or negotiate. Would I be okay with that as a buyer's broker? Yeah, yeah. What we were just saying here, you may have to go back and talk with the lender. Hey, can they do this? So if you were offered on a house and you were right at the top where they were approved for, probably need to go back to the lender and say, hey, can we do this? Guess what I had to do? Exactly that. We'll talk more about that. Yeah, as we go through, we'll talk more about that because that's what I had to do. So here's a quick one before we get into actually, because all of what we just kind of went through is mindset. Changing our own mindset, how we think, was really what all this first part is about. So before we get into how do we actually handle this, what might we say, what might we ask? And we've done some of that verbal judo already. I want you to write down your process for handling customer concerns. And here's what I want you to think of. So go ahead and write that down. I'll tell you what I'm looking for. If I'm brand new, and my mentor should understand this, I'm brand new. And I want you to teach me how to handle concerns, issues, objections, as we've always heard them. In simple terms, could you tell me how to do that? Or are you going to go into, well, it's like if somebody says they'd like you to reduce your compensation, you would simply say, no. Do you have any other questions? That's not teaching them how, that's teaching them what to say. What's the process? What do you do when that comes up? How do you handle the concern? So now that you've thought about that, here's the basics. I hear the concern. Step one, I'm going to repeat it. So I hear what you're saying is the seller is not able to offer the full compensation and they believe that they need to only do 2 1/4. Second step, clarify. It's clarifying it. So if I'm hearing correctly, the only way that this is going to happen is your seller believes they've got to reject my offer. Is that correct? But they're willing to do 2 1/4. They're just not willing to do the 3%. I can dignify it. Step 3, acknowledge it. I can go, oh. That's a quick, easy acknowledgement, right? Just grunting. Yeah, that's a. I can put it in other words, saying, listen, I could appreciate that. I mean, if I'm in her shoes, I certainly want to make sure I walk away with as much money as possible. You just agreed with them when you do that. It's an agreement. And if you're not fighting with them, can they fight you? Can they throw any punch back? So through that acknowledgement, through that dignifying of their concern, we're not arguing. So we discuss it further, getting any other clarification. One of the things that I would always put it as is you're going to go 1 degree deeper. Write a Roman numeral down, then a capital letter, and then the Arabic one, and then the lowercase a. Those are each a degree deeper. You want to take every first question 2 or 3 or 4 levels deeper. Then we're going to address it. However you need to address it, you're going to get confirmation, you're going to close. Did we handle that concern for you? Now that's the process. Now let's see what we can do to work that a little bit more simple. So I'm kind of hanging with this whole situation where we wrote it, we asked for 3%, sellers come back saying, I only want to give you 2.25. So you have a great half-hour long conversation with a very experienced, very productive agent who even compliments you on your time in the business, your level of production, and gee, I really want to work with you. Who even does a great presentation saying, well, listen, I'm looking forward to it, and we've got acceptance here, and all you and I have to do is to take 2.25% each. Great presentation, great sales skills. And then after you sit back and you repeat it, you say, so seller's good with everything, but I'm hearing that they want us to drop to 2.25%. So seller's asking us to give up our money. Again, I'm reframing it. It's a sales technique. Now, what do you say to them? How many of you say, okay, if that's what it takes to make it happen? Anybody do that? Anybody who would admit to it? Or as she put it to me, that's only, Darwin, it's only $1,000. I mean, you're telling me that you're willing to walk away from putting this deal together and losing this home for your buyers? She's good. And it's only $1,000. You know what she did? She even reduced it from the $2,250 it really was. Because it was $2,250, and she's going and breaking it down to, well, if you're only collecting 50%, it's only $1,000 to you. The other is the company's money. It doesn't matter. She didn't say that, but that's what she's referring to. She's good. But what do you say? No. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Right? It's like, no, I'm not going to negotiate with you on my compensation. I have a contract with the buyer. The buyer owes me 3%. If I'm going to negotiate my compensation, I'm going to negotiate it with them. No. She was shocked, especially when it come out from somebody in my position, quote unquote, with my experience in my production. I'm going, she says, why would you do that? What was my answer first? I gave you a hint earlier. What's your integrity worth? I have a real issue when there's a certain circumstance that the same that everybody has. We haven't even got a deal put together yet. I haven't lost anything, and neither is my buyer. By the way, you want to know why my buyer offered on this house? Because we couldn't put it together because another agent and another seller thought that my compensation was negotiable. That's why we came to this house. She said, your integrity, what do you mean? By the way, I'm giving you verbal judo. Well, it's my personal integrity. How do I charge these people or drop from 3 that I told them in the beginning down to 2.25? I said, 1, if I was willing to do that, shouldn't I just charge that to them right up front on the contract? I says, 2, what do I do with everybody else that I've worked with in the past and all those who come in the future? Are you asking me to drop it down to 2.25 for everyone? Well, no, but what about your integrity with these people? I said, exactly. My integrity has everything to do with it because I've essentially lied to them if I was charging 3 and now I'm doing 2.25. My integrity comes into question. Now, would they love me for it? Absolutely. Because they're saving money. My integrity is too important. I can't do it. She didn't understand that. She looked at it as one thing, you're losing a deal. What I have in the back of my head is this. You really don't understand how to sell this, and you've got the wrong mentality. Okay. How about this? And I've kind of thrown it to you already, but how can I charge this this person 2.25 when I'm charging everybody else 3? What I've done in the past and what I'm going to do in the future. Are there any special circumstances to this? The answer is no. Have I charged, by the way, truthful, I use this. Has anybody ever done less than what they've contracted for? If you've done business, you've done it. Okay. I charged one person 1%. I charge another person 28%. That goes way back. I charged, back in my Century 21 days, $2,100 minimum. That's what I charged. It was $2,100 minimum. If I'm going to do real estate, you're paying a minimum of $2,100. Well, I sold a $7,600 house. Calculate that out. That's 28% if I remember correctly. Circumstances. Person I charged 1%. They found the house. I'd been working with them. They came across the FSBO back before the days where we were covered. He's a disabled American veteran. I believed it was the right thing to do. I did it for 1%. Have I run into that again since? No. But if I ran into it again, would I? Yes. I love it, Jack. You're right on. Right on, Jack. I also threw this one out to you. Shouldn't I have agreed to the 2.25 up front? I'd have to think they would question my integrity, even though they would like it, even if I did. So this is why your integrity is so important. It's a straight, flat out answer. So sure, here's another one. There are special circumstances, and I don't consider a seller's desired bottom line to be a special circumstance for my buyer. Right? Had nothing to do with my buyer. This is what the seller was looking for in a bottom line. So sure, there are special circumstances, and I don't consider your seller's desired bottom line as a special circumstance for my buyer. My buyer signed a contract. My buyer is paying me. They're trying to build it into the purchase agreement. The reason they offered this way is because they don't have the cash to pull out of their pocket. That was readily obvious between the 3% and the 4% in concessions. Here's one. Kurt Penny gave me this one. Many of you would know Kurt, longtime agent, but he put it this way, and he says, for years. I work for Coldwell Banker professionals. I work for Century 21 professionals. We don't negotiate or cut our compensation. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. But that has to be hard truth. You know the best example of that? I will always, if I procure both sides of a transaction, and I believe all of our managers, I can tell you upper management has been okay with this. It's what I chose to do. If I have both sides, it's 5%. Okay? I do that all the time. Why? Because I did it once. I set a standard for myself. That was a circumstance that was easy to be able to say, yes, I can do that. That's a great example of that. Now, here's what I want you to do, because after you have a conversation with the listing agent, and it's readily apparent that they're not going to want to pay you your full compensation or contribute to, because they're only wanting to contribute 2.25%. If you and your seller feel the necessity to reject the buyer's offer, then please at least give them something else to consider. And don't screw with my compensation. I may not put it in those terms, but leave my compensation alone. Don't adjust that. Matter of fact, with this buyer, don't adjust the concessions. They need that. What would they have to do? And we would have to believe that it would appraise. We'd guide them to adjust the price. Now, I didn't say that my buyer would accept that. But if you have to reject it, make the adjustment on the purchase price with a counteroffer. Then I'll see what I can do with my buyer. Okay? Now, here's what this agent did with me. I don't know if she was trying to use it against me, but it came right out. Compensation to be paid by seller of 2.25%. Right on the purchase agreement. How many of you just went, right? Because now you have to tell your buyer. The reason that they're not going to get the house is because you won't reduce your compensation. Think listing agents would do that on purpose? Yes, they will. But it doesn't matter to you because you're a great a great buyer agent. Now, you understand if you're on the listing side, your job is to be able to make a happy seller and a happy buyer. Seller ends up with what they want in the bottom line. The buyer gets what they want. And get it, well, here, let's get you the home for the lowest possible price. What do we tell a seller? Let's get your home sold and net you the highest amount. In the end, both are happy. You all know you could have a conversation, and I've done this. I've called them up and say, hey, Michael, Darwin, I can tell you I've talked with my seller about it. Here's what I definitely know at this point. He cannot accept your offer as written. I can see that you're asking them to pay both concessions and your compensation. Is that a requirement? Because at this point, they have to reject your offer. We'll be making a counteroffer. What's best for you? Michael's going to tell me, leave my compensation alone. He's going to say, they need those concessions. He's going to say, knowing they're rejecting, I'm going to ask you to counter it on the price. Right? Michael, give me a head nod. There we go. I thought you were frozen there for a second. I just want to make sure you're still with me. All right. So let's turn to now, we've got to do this with the buyer. We got to talk to the buyer. How much did I say it was? 0.75%? No, it's 25% of our compensation. Convert that to dollars. $2,250. And now I got to call my buyer. Tell my buyer that you're not going to get the house because I won't reduce my compensation. $2,250. Is that what I have to do? Everybody go, no. There it is. Livonia's right on track with this. Guys, simplify it. So I call them up. Hi, guys. Great news. We've got a house, but we're $2,250 apart. He says, is that all? I said, yep. I said, so that's the simple version. Let me give you the difficult because I want you to know. They didn't want to pay me $2,250. So here's all we're going to do. I've already talked with the mortgage company. I've got a pre-approval letter for you at 3015 because his maximum was 300. Happens to be that with this house and what the taxes are and everything else, they could qualify for the 3015. I said, so here's all we have to do. Like you said, it's only 2250. That's all. We're going to go ahead and give them an offer 3015 and we're good to go. They said, okay, send it over. That was about a 2, maybe 3-minute conversation to get them to accept it and for me to be able to receive my full compensation. Because I didn't call them up and say, well, these idiots won't pay me my compensation. And that's kind of where our mindset was when I first gave you this scenario. No, they don't pay it. My buyer does. We could have accepted the 2.25 and they'd pay me the 7.75 out of their pocket. My buyer didn't have that option. Don't allow your compensation to be negotiated in the purchase agreement. Your compensation is already there. That is simple. Increase the price. If they can, adjust the concessions. Seller has a number. That was it. And on this deal, this agent gave up still their 0.75 and still had, I'm guessing it wasn't her money, but she had to pay her buyer broker compliance fee. So she lost a lot of money because, well, again, she's a great negotiator, but I think a change in mindset would make a difference for that. Oh, let's say, here's one. And just shifting it a little bit. Hey, I got great news for you. The seller accepted all of our terms except for the price. And you can say that when they didn't negotiate your compensation or if there were concessions built in. That's so much easier to negotiate than you feeling guilty because you want to be paid what they signed a contract to pay you. They've already signed it. Don't allow your compensation to be negotiated as part of the purchase agreement. All that is one way of getting your money. And I can call them, hey, maybe that 5,000 with this scenario, maybe that was just right to the price. Maybe they say, well, could we just pay you the additional compensation? We're shuffling papers at that point, guys. Forget the label compensation. Forget that label. Don't allow your compensation to be part of the negotiation. Talk the numbers. Talk the numbers. And that's what's going to make it really easy for you. So this one was kind of a passionate one. I think might have come out. Maybe it's because I'm in Birmingham with you guys. I don't know. They just bring in the best of you. Thoughts, questions, experiences, additional input. Let's hear your collaboration with this. Well, you guys really don't have anything. John, you got something?
Yeah, I'll give you something. I had one last year when the market was pretty insane, and we had gone 50,000 over asking price,
Wow.
guaranteed appraisal, putting 80,000 down, and they wouldn't pay my full commission. And that was after one counter offer, and we said, well, we'll raise our commission, and they still wouldn't cover it. My
Interesting.
buyer ended up paying
By
it.
the way,
The buyer paid the difference.
see, it gets down to this. You can't fix stupid. Stupid is, I'm having a little bit of fun with this. Don't hate me for this. Stupid goes bone deep, man. And it's because there ain't a whole lot of great gray matter. People's egos get in the way. They just can't understand how it doesn't matter what was your bottom line. Because I can put $200,000 in your pocket and you pay the compensation, or I can put $200,000 in your pocket and they pay the compensation. Which 200,000 would you like? I mean, it's the same 200,000.
Right.
But John's experience telling you,
There's
not
another one I'd
everybody's going
like
to get
to
it.
throw out. I don't know if many people have done new construction. the first thing with your client, you really have to have a good buyer's meeting and discussing the agency and how the commission works. Because where this is going to go is because new construction, they don't pay full commission. Pulte, Newmark, Lombardo, they're all like between two, sometimes two and a half. So you have to let them know ahead of time that they're going to be covering that part of it, and there's no mistaking on that, that everybody's on the same page. And I've had the buyers cover that as well.
John, you actually brought up something that I should have. Everything that I did with this is because of what John just did. It's predicated on you having a buyer consultation. That you've sat down with a buyer before you ever showed him a home and you said, hey, here's how things work. This is what you're going to experience. And of course, you asked a whole lot of questions. We do the same thing we do as a seller, but we start with a whole lot of questions to be able to get to know them because everything is about them. When we find out what their experience is, it's a first-time buyer. They have no idea what it takes to be able to buy a home. What is the experience going to be? And even with this couple that I've been working with, guys, they each have bought homes, but it's been years since they've done it. It's like they've never done it before. Even though I told them, here's the steps. Once you find a house, this will happen, then this will happen. Guess what the question was today when we were all done with the inspection? So now what happens? I'd already told them, but you know what? Well, as I mentioned when we first talked, here's the next step. You just take them through and walk them through it, even though you got it up front. But see, that consultation was your interview. And when I got done, you explained the whole process and you said, so would you like me to help you do this? Yes, great. Well, the state of Michigan, again, wants you to know that I represent you. Sign here. And this is our agreement. This is where you pay me the compensation of the 3% plus the $495. And you're going to tell me if I'm right that you, based on what we know, you'll want to build that into the purchase agreement, and we're going to ask the seller to pay that. Is that correct? That's why this is checked. Da 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 da. Any questions? And yes, that's the close because you've already asked them, would you like me to, if I do all this, would you like me to help you? Yes. Why ask them again? Just direct their signature. They didn't have any other questions. So everything that I gave you today literally was predicated on you had that buyer interview, that buyer consultation. So John, thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad you stepped up with that one because that literally is that important. Okay, good one. Any other contributions? Contributions from Birmingham? Guys, I love to see the numbers that we're a part of this today. I love to be able to, speak about the things that are really passionate. And I know that I'm just missing some things. So if you have great subject matter, things that you're running into and you're going, man, this would just be a great one. I'd love to hear. It might be me. There might be some great managers or great producers like a Jack Bertoya or a John Goings that could say a lot of stuff. Bring it my way. And as I put it, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. Thanks for having me in Birmingham. If you'd like me to come to your office, we'll do it live at your office. We might even be able to get pizza or something in for all I know. So throw it out, talk to your branch managers, and guys, see you next week. Have a great one.